Someone said I should stop dreaming. I'm waiting for everything to load up. Instagram is what we have left. I'm just doing 15 minutes. A very quick 15 minutes. The title of today's message is Losing Our History. I hope I can finish it in 15 minutes. If I can't, I'll continue some other time. But I'm going to start. So let's start now. We're live on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Hello, Jigga. What's poppin', bro? All right, guys. So we still haven't heard from Carol. Jigga, have you heard from Carol? Anyway, before I start, some guy came to my page and he dropped a comment. His name was Collar Flex. He said, my formula is very interesting. You throw out a controversial topic, get your followers riled up, then you direct them to a video on your YouTube channel where you're getting paid based on views and clicks. In the interest of transparency, why don't you tell your followers if your YouTube page is monetized? I'm sure you block or delete, all good. Just answer the question if you claim to be different from those who criticize. I totally disagree with their antics as well. Anyone promising money for God's favor is serving something else than the God I know. Now, on the YouTube channel, I'm going to show you Facebook. Can you see Facebook Live? And then Instagram Live. Both are absolutely free. And I made the option available. It's easier to sell a YouTube link. I would have put the permanent message on Facebook, but I realized initially that when I was circulating Facebook links, because I only joined YouTube this year, when I was circulating Facebook links, it was telling people to log in before they could view the videos. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. And it was frustrating. And I noticed that my message was not getting to the people who were not on Facebook or who were not logged into Facebook. Whereas on YouTube, you don't need to be logged in. YouTube is available to everyone and anyone. You don't have to be logged in. So I put the message to on YouTube. Yes, YouTube is monetized, but here's the problem. For you to make substantial money from YouTube, you have to have 100,000 views, 1 million views actually and above. That's when you make money from YouTube, or else it's a couple of $100. Now, the message is free for 24 hours on Instagram. After that, Instagram deletes the video. If you guys remember, I initially kept the message only on Instagram. But the problem was every day the message gone. How would you like to have a powerful message you cannot go back and review? It's crazy. Facebook requires logins. Instagram dies after 24 hours. And YouTube charges. If I want to ask you, how many of you actually watch the commercials, the adverts on YouTube? Most of you just wait for that 5 seconds, skip ad, pim, and move on. So the people that are complaining are never even contributing. This Collar Flex guy, for instance, when we were raising money for the woman who had a huge fibroid case and had to be on oxygen in Ibadan, he wasn't there. How many times has he contributed to feeding the public? None from our records. How many times has he done what he's supposed to be doing as a Christian, not just for us, Sorry, not for us, because very rarely do. I just told you guys I just got a brand new iPad. It cost me about $600. I had to save up for it because my other iPad was hanging in the middle of my teaching. I could manage it for myself. Do you understand? I could manage it for myself. But I can't be teaching you and then waiting for iPad to wake up. That iPad is about 6 years old. I could have come and said, guys, we need an iPad. Yes, we actually need the iPad. Yes, we need it, and I should not be buying it out of my own resources. But I want to be like Paul. When Paul had, he used what he had to take care of himself. When he didn't have, he asked. I couldn't afford a $1,000 laptop. I couldn't afford it. Every day I use data. Do you think it's easy? Last night there was an issue. There were two churches side by side having programs. I had to talk about it to show the people. I used my data, and this time it wasn't even on the network. It was on mobile. You know how expensive mobile data is. Just try and use Airtel mobile data. Just try it. You see how it is. So I said I was going to address that. If anybody has any problem, then he's saying, I want to read something else, because if I don't address it, I'll be getting upset. That's just my problem. Then somebody came there and commented. He said, same difference. As far as I know, you're only different if you do not make any financial gains from preaching the gospel. Those pastors did not buy their private jets in one day. Now 5K, they take enter 5 million. Dare to be different by channeling whatever proceeds you make out of your teachings to a better society. Like you want the Yahoo Boys pastors to. Nobody asked you to tread the path you chose. So finance it completely from your pocket. If I were to finance it entirely from my pocket, I'll probably be able to afford to give you one teaching every 2 weeks. Do you know how many phones I use? Plus iPad. No, don't worry. I would still, what I really want to talk about is, you understand? Now, I told him, you see, if we want to be like Jesus, we are Christians, we are followers of Jesus. If Jesus received contributions and support, we have to, or else we are not Christians. We are not following him. Luke chapter 8, read it from 1 to 3. People were contributing to help the message go around. So everybody's saying fast forward. Yes, I want to get to the message. But you see, if I don't deal, your pastors don't deal with issues when they arise. That's why they become big issues at the end of the day. Do you understand what I'm saying? You have to deal with issues when they come up, and you have to address. That's why I made it public. There's nothing I'm hiding. So today's message is going to be more, for the first time, it's going to be more a discussion than a biblical sermon. I'm just going to ask you a few questions. You see, I was reading the other day, and my spirit was led to, I was reading history, because I read a lot of history. Because if you do not know where you're coming from, if you're going and you miss your way, you will not be able to retrace your steps. History is there for us to be able to retrace our steps. I don't know if I'm making sense to you guys. Everyone is going to retrace, we're going to need to retrace our steps. And I realized that there's a garrison in Turkey. I saw it in Turkey when the Romans colonized Turkey. That same one was in Britain, but Britain totally wiped it out. They didn't want it to be part of their history. And I sat down and started thinking about our own history. The Christians came. and made our history pagan. Everything. They came, our new moons, every celebration became pagan. And we burnt a lot of our books. It's not everything that is traditional that is pagan. You have to understand. It's not everything we inherited from our forefathers that was pagan. They took everything away, burnt the relics, sold, took it to their own countries, and gave us a pagan Christianity. They gave us Christmas that is entirely pagan, has nothing to do with the Bible, entirely. The only part of Christmas that is not pagan is that a child was born. When was it born? Not on Christmas, not near Christmas. They celebrate the wise men. Who are the wise men? Magicians. The Magi. I read it to you in the Bible. So if they replaced our history with Christ, is different. What they did was they replaced our history with deeper pagan shit. Easter is all pagan. Everything about it. Easter bunny pagan. Easter eggs pagan. The time they chose for Easter pagan. So we gave up Ifa for the Oyinbo version of Ifa. We gave up Orunmila for the Oyinbo version of Orunmila. Every single person who stood up and tried to bring out the truth about the Bible was murdered. Because they didn't want the truth out. And guess what? They don't want the truth out today. That's why they fight me. I don't know if I'm making sense to you. Where is our history, Nigeria? Why is the church's sole job destroying history? You know why? Because they want you to feel like you didn't exist until they came. And my anger is they didn't bring Jesus. They brought paganism. You worship Jesus with money, pagan. You go to church on a Sunday, pagan. You give gifts during Christmas, pagan. Kiss under the mistletoe, pagan. And then they tell you Ifa is bad. As long as you are giving me mistletoe, Ifa is not bad. As long as you are giving me Christmas, Ifa is not bad. As long as you are giving me Easter eggs and Easter freaking bunnies, what does a rabbit have to do with Jesus? When are you people going to wake up? As long as you are collecting my tithe, Ifa is not bad. If you want to make Ifa look bad, give me real Jesus. And I do not remember Jesus going to destroy history. It was the priests that destroyed history. Jesus chased out demons. He didn't chase out history. Today, the demons are preaching their history to you and making it look like it's yours. Time to reject the history of the demons. Somebody said we worship on Sunday because Jesus was raised to the death on Sunday. It's a beautiful reason, but I want to take you back to the year 300 when Emperor Constantine moved the Sunday worship, the worship from the Sabbath on Saturday to Sunday. Why did he do it? It was political and it had nothing to do with the resurrection of Jesus. It was politricks. Pagan politricks. Sunday is the day of the worship of the Sun God. Sunday, sun God. You can't be this confused, can you? Sun God. You worship, you gather on Sunday, the day of worship of the sun God. You give money. You recite incantations that you think are prayers. And then you go and destroy Ifa. God will punish you. I played a video of Biodun Fatoyibo saying on a pulpit, what requires blood will not take palm oil. And you say Ifa is bad. You see a church building and there are human beings buried alive in the foundations. When are you going to get out of pagan worship? When are we going to give our children our real history? They came, and you being foolish, you being stupid, you being the typical gullible you, burnt down the relics of your history and replaced them with the artifacts of the greatest prostitute mankind has ever experienced. I said I wasn't going to read the Bible today, but I'm going to read Revelation 17 again, just in case you missed it. I'm going to read Revelation 17 again. Revelation 17:6. I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. She's drinking your blood. The greatest whore. They take the rainbow. The significance of the rainbow was to tell Noah that God will not destroy the world again for untold sexual sins. And they take that rainbow and make it a representation of sexual sins. And then they try to publicly, before the glare of our eyes, bring those sins into the church. And you tell me if I is bad, God punish you. I would rather go back to my origins as an African than indulge in prostitution. Now here's the problem. We realize we've been prostituted. Our minds have been raped with the fallacies of pagan prostitution. And we have no history to go back to. Because while they were spoon feeding you the destruction of Oholiba and Oholosho, as Posh Mama would say it, they made sure they made you burn your own history. And I have come not to rebuild the Ifa shrines, not to take you back to the river to worship Oshun, but to show you Jesus. And just like they have done to my predecessors, they have begun to do them to me, because I want to take away what they substituted our traditions with, a deeper form of prostitution and fornication, worse than our ancestors indulged in, worse than all the demons in the Bible put together. They brought it to your courts, and you serve a God they created. I was reading historyextra.com because I was looking for the story of John Wycliffe. And while I was reading the story of John Wycliffe, I decided to search about other men that I knew about that were killed because they spoke the truth. And I made a little compilation that I'm going to read to you today. I'm going to start again with John Wycliffe. In 1427, Pope Martin ordered that John Wycliffe's bones be exhumed from their grave and burned and cast into the river Swift. He had been dead for 40 years, but he will not be let rest. Why? Because he made the first translation of the Bible. Wycliffe began publishing pamphlets arguing that rather than pursuing wealth and power, the church should have the poor at heart. Daddy Freeze could not produce pamphlets. He produced Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook pamphlets telling Nigeria that you're gonna keep getting poorer if you feed these greedy bastards behind pulpits instead of feeding the hungry. I see the similarity. Do you see it? In 1377, the Bishop of London demanded that Wycliffe appear before the court to explain the wonderful things streaming forth from his mouth. When the Pope heard of the fiasco, he issued a papal bull, an official papal letter or document in which he accused Wycliffe of vomiting out from the filthy dungeons of his heart the most wicked and damnable heresies. How can someone telling you to feed the poor instead of feeding gluttonous bastards, how can that be heresy? Was Jesus gluttonous? Did he have a mansion or drive a Mercedes? No. He pointed you, Wycliffe pointed you to Christianity, but you burned his bones. Wycliffe believed that the Bible should be available to everyone. What is my teaching? I say everyone should be a shepherd. For you to be a shepherd, you have to understand the truth and worship God in the spirit. But they don't want me to. They want you to worship God through them. They need you to touch their chairs and be blessed. They need you to hang their pictures around your neck, not because they care about you, so that when they see you walking on the street, they know whose slave you are. Wycliffe was the first person who put aside 13 years of his life to print an English Bible, because initially the Bible was in Latin and only scholars of Latin could read it. He spent 13 years of his life printing it. And at the end of the day, they tried to put a bill saying his Bible should be outlawed. Why should the translation of a Bible be outlawed? You know why? Because it carries the truth and the poor can read it. The prisoners can read it and get freed. But they don't want you to have the truth. They call me the Antichrist, just like they called Wycliffe the Antichrist, whereas you're paying tithe to the Antichrist. I want to speak about Jan Hus. He was a newly ordained Czech priest. He was appointed to a pulpit in Prague to minister in the church. He was inspired by Wycliffe's teaching, which were now circulating in Europe despite the fact that they burnt his bones. He was called the disciple of the Antichrist, and consequence was predictable. He was arrested once again for heresy. His trial took place in a city called Constance, and it has gone down as one of the most spectacular trials in history. It was more like a carnival. Every big wig in Europe was there to see a man killed. One archbishop arrived with 600 horses. 700 prostitutes offered their services to the worship of the greatest prostitute. 500 people drowned in the lake. The Pope fell off his carriage into a snowdrift. The atmosphere was exhilarating. That Hus' eventual conviction and barbaric execution must have seemed an anticlimax. But slaughtered he was, burnt at stake. His death galvanized his supporters into a revolt. Priests and churches were attacked. The authorities retaliated. Within a few short years, Bohemia had erupted into civil war, all because Jan Hus had the gall to translate the Bible. What about William Tyndale? As far as English Bible is concerned, the most high prolific translator to be murdered was William Tyndale. It was now the 16th century. Henry VIII was on the throne. Wyclif's translations were still banned, and although manuscript copies were available on the black market, they were hard to find and expensive to buy. Most people still had no inkling of what the Bible really said. And guess what? Fast forward 2018, most of your dumbasses still don't know what he said. But printing had become commonplace, and Tyndale believed the time was right for an accessible, up-to-date translation. Hallelujah. He knew he could create, and all he needed was the funding and the blessing of the church. It didn't take him long to realize that nobody in London was prepared to help him, just like no one in Nigeria is prepared to help us. Not even his friend, the Bishop of London. The religious climate appeared less oppressive in Germany. Luther had already translated the Bible into German. The Protestant Reformation was gathering its pace, and Tyndale believed he could have a better chance of realizing his project there, so he traveled to Cologne and began printing in Germany. This, it transpired, was a mistake. Cologne was still under the control of the Archbishop loyal to Rome. He was halfway through printing the book of Matthew when he heard the print shop was about to be raided. He bundled up his papers and fled. It was a story that will be repeated several times over the few years. Tyndale spent the next few years dodging English spies and Roman agents, but he managed to complete his Bible, and copies were soon flawed in England. Illegally, of course. The project was complete, but Tyndale was a marked man. It was only in England, Cardinal Wolsey conducting a campaign against Tyndale's Bible. No one with a connection to Tyndale or his translation was safe. Thomas Hitton, a priest who had met Tyndale in Europe, confessed to smuggling 2 copies of the Bible into the country. He was charged with heresy and burnt alive. Thomas Binley, a lawyer whose connection to Tyndale was tangential at the most, was also thrown into fire. Tyndale's life was no less tragic. He was betrayed by Henry Phillips, a young aristocrat who stole his father's money and gambled it away. Tyndale was in hiding, and he was discovered. Ladies and gentlemen, they seized Tyndale. It was the last free moment of his life. He was charged with heresy and burnt at the stake a few weeks later. Burnt for what? And guess what? When he was burnt, he had the copy of his translation on his neck. And he was burnt for daring to translate the Bible, to make it accessible for you. And they say our history is bloody. And they dare say the Muslims are bloody. May God punish all of them and their children.